Hello everybody, it's Chibi, and today I'm here to bring you a discussion video on the 7 deadly sins. Now, since there's not going to be any chapter this week, I found out like less than an hour and a half, 2 hours ago that there was not going to be a chapter for Taizai this week. I was like, oh well, damn. So I decided to actually go back and read certain chapters that I just wanted to see for myself once again. For instance, I went back to around chapter 77 and 78 to where Bond talks to the Horn of Cernunnos. And this is the major portion of the last arc that has us all still confused and questioning. So today, in this video's discussion, I'm going to be talking about personal theories I just came up with in less than an hour and a half after looking at all the information of these chapters, rereading them again for what I know now with the current chapters, along with talking about some mythological aspects that tie in with certain elements of this. Now, the thing is, okay, this does contain spoilers to the recent chapter of Taizai, so if you're an anime-only watcher, this will spoil you. So, I'm just letting you know right now. So, getting on to the topic, I just want to dive in deep and talk about something really freaking crazy. I went back to chapter 77. I recommend you all go back to chapter 77 or 78 if you want to read it again. It's the entire aspect with Bond making the deal with supposedly the Goddess clan about killing Meliodas, as we know. Well, you all know pretty much by now how I truly feel about Merlin. How I've pretty much made a lot of theories about Merlin and how Merlin's most likely evil, how Merlin's made Galther, how Merlin's probably made Hawk, stuff like that. And when I went back to read chapter 77 and 78, I noticed something that is very, very odd. Very fucking odd. Like, it really stood out when I started thinking about it. And it felt like it was nothing, but then thinking about it, I was like, that seems like that is something. Let me explain, okay? So, I completely forgot that Hawk was with Bond when Bond was talking to the Horn of Cernunnos, that was supposedly the Goddess clan. And Hawk was there in the entire conversation. I forgot completely about that. I honestly fucking did. And looking at it, I'm thinking like, wait a minute, how did Hawk get there? I backed up a couple chapters. I was thinking like, okay, how did Hawk get here again? And I found out that Hawk got teleported to this room because of Vivian, Merlin's apprentice. Hawk got teleported to this room that is underneath the capital, the kingdom, and it's the kingdom's treasure, the Horn of Cernunnos. Vivian teleported Hawk accidentally, as it seems. It seems like it was accidental, or did not actually mean to teleport Hawk there, and Hawk was there hearing the entire conversation. Now, here's the weird thing about this, okay? We do know Vivian is the apprentice of Merlin sometime in the past. It also is connected to mythology. If you know your mythology with Merlin and Vivian and stuff like that, most likely you will realize the connection between the two and their actual story past. I recommend go read the mythology if you do not know the backstory behind Vivian and Merlin. So, one thing I want to mention, okay? If my theory does prove to be true, which this chapter, going back to read these chapters, kind of once again hints at what I was saying, why would Vivian teleport Hawk into that room? And clearly, it was accidental. Well, I mean, it's obvious that we could tell. And the only way I could see this is if Merlin created Hawk. Let me explain. We clearly saw in the battle between Merlin and Vivian, Merlin beat the absolute shit out of Vivian, her apprentice. Merlin just destroyed her apprentice like it was nothing. And Merlin being smart and kind of like a tactician, and if Merlin did make Hawk with her magic, it would make sense how Vivian couldn't manipulate Hawk. Like teleport him off to a volcano or something. Then maybe that is why he was sent to the room with Bond. The closest sin next to him. For instance, what if there was like a safety precaution on Hawk to where Hawk would teleport the closest to Bond? Or the sin that's closer. Get what I'm saying? Because it doesn't make sense how Hawk just magically teleported there in the conversation. It felt like it was very random, but there's definitely more to it. There's definitely more to it. And there's not just that either. I want to show you two pictures real quick, and these two pictures really stood out when I actually went back to look at the Horn of Cernunnos. I completely forgot it was a horn, I really did. I thought it was like some form of pillar or something, but when I found out the Horn of Cernunnos, I instantly remembered how Hendy looked. Now, look at these two pictures. Hendy and the Horn of Cernos. Look at the horns. How similar is that? Supposedly from the dialogue, from what I read, it is not completely stated by Bond. Like, Bond is not 100% sure that this person he is talking to is the Goddess Clan. As soon as he walks into the room, he's like, hello, are you the Goddess Clan, or whatever you are, come in here, I'm trying to speak to you. Pretty much that's what Bond's saying. Bond doesn't even know if this is the Goddess Clan when he walked in, so it's obvious something else very suspicious is going on here. And if you look at the two horns, they're really similar. Like, Hendy's horns looking almost exactly alike the Horn of Cernos. So, as soon as I saw this, I instantly went to Google, and I started typing in the Horn of Cernos. I instantly typed it in, I tried to figure out what Cernos was, and I found out Cernos was a Celtic god. There's not much information on this Celtic god at all, besides it's this Celtic god sitting in a cross-legged formation, like just sat cross-legged, and had horns, like a deer or something, or an antelope. That's all it was. And there's not much information on this creature at all, besides it kind of being like a god. And it's very interesting when you see some certain, like, interesting dialogue that stands out with this Horn of Cernos, or whatever being was talking to Bond. As we know, Hawk is there. Hawk was saying, like, hey, Bond, you shouldn't be trusting this thing. I mean, it seems very suspicious. You shouldn't be trusting this thing. And that's what Hawk says to Bond and the Horn, pretty much. And then the Horn says to Hawk, silence, shut up, pig. Directly to Hawk. That's what that horn says. Now, here's the thing. It seems like that thing, I highly doubt it is really the Goddess Clan. The more I look at it, the more it seems to be pointing towards the Demon Clan. Now, let me explain why. This is going to go into my segment where I want to talk about why I think it's the Demon Clan. Okay. If you all know how close this series is to mythology, it kind of fucking shocks you. I went to read some mythology on different names that appear in this series and stuff, and then I realized how closely similar certain elements that actually happen in mythology happen in this series. And we all know back in a long time ago, Meliodas, blew up Danafor. We know there was a giant-ass hole. I talked about this in my last review of the manga. I'm not going to go directly back into that, but I want to talk about some elements of it I left out in my last video of it. Balor's son. Balor had 3 children. 3 children. Or 3 grandchildren. Not exact children. Grandchildren. His daughter, his only daughter, was pretty much locked up in a tower of crystal in the mythology of Balor. Balor was fearful because he saw a vision to where he would be slain by one of his grandchildren. For instance, Lugh. Or Lugh. Lugh. I want to call him Lugh. Pretty much he would be slain by his grandchild Lugh. And so what he did in this act was he actually locked up his daughter into a crystal tower. And when he did this, eventually this dude called Balrog, or something like that, this girl or whatever, was a druidist. And this druidist saved the children. Saved the children of the daughter of Balor. And the thing was, as soon as I saw druidist, I'm like, wait a minute, what the fuck? If you see some interesting dialogue in Taizai, I think it's between chapters 80 through 90. It was between in there. Hendy says a piece of dialogue in the series that has never really been explained to this very point. He states in the past he was a druid of the forest. Hendy does say this. He clearly says this in between chapters 80 and 90 or 95. It's between there. He clearly says this to Dreyfus and Meliodas, when, Dreyfus is technically still alive. And so what's interesting is, Hendy was a druid of the forest. And the thing is, too, is a druidess saved the children, but sadly enough, 2 of the children got casted into the ocean by Balor, and Lugh was the only one to technically survive. And then eventually Lugh joined this other group, and he eventually slayed his grandfather, Balor, pretty much. And Balor collapsed into the earth, and his eye made a giant-ass hole into the ground in the earth. And the thing is, the connections. So we know there's connections with every single character. Like, there's always been connections. That's one thing that Taizai does well. We know every single sin is a different race. It's already been clarified by Galter a long time ago between chapters 51 and 59. All the sins are a different race. No sin is the exact same race. And also, we do know all the past backstories that we have been shown thus far are all connected some way. All the past of the sins are connected some form or another. They always are. And the thing that's very interesting is that since these connections are there, it makes me also think that maybe Hendy could be related to, if this is really following mythology, which Taizai has been following technically mythology, certain elements of it, putting little interesting twists to it. What if Hendy was one of the people, or maybe the son or the grandson of whoever saved the daughter from a Balor? Like, saved the daughter of Balor and the children, and saved Meliodas. Now, one other thing I do want to mention that actually kind of confirms my theories a little bit more. Lugh, the grandson of Balor. In the description of Celtic mythology, looking him up, I looked him up to see what the description of him was. He was a man that looked like a boy, a very, very young boy, like he was very youthful. And looking up pictures of Lugh, I saw him have blonde hair. Very interesting. And he was depicted as a youth, like a child. And what does Meliodas look like? Like a child. Now, here's one thing that goes along with this. Now, this goes back into some certain interesting dialogue that was said by the Horn of Cernunnos. The Horn of Cernunnos, when it gives Bon his mission to kill Meliodas, the Horn states this with this very interesting dialogue. It's on chapter 78 or 79. It's one of those chapters if you want to see it for yourself. The Horn states that he used to go by a different name. Meliodas now goes by the name of the Dragon Sin of Wrath Meliodas. His name now. Pretty much what the dialogue implies is that Meliodas in the past had a different name. He had a different name before he became a Sin. And honestly, thinking about it, why would Meliodas change his name? Because he was Lugh. He was the one that slayed Balor and Danafor. He changed his name after those events. You get what I'm saying? So, all these different little foreshadowing elements that's even been happening recently is fucking ridiculous. This is why Taizai is greatness, and this is why I wanted to discuss it. Hopefully you all understood what I was talking about. If you don't believe me, like I said, go read the chapters for yourself, and you'll see why all these connections make sense. You can even look at the mythology of the names I brought up, and you can see it for yourself. Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. I love you all so much. You have a wonderful day or night wherever you live. Please be safe. Chibi out.